Every time that you're eating foods that have preservatives, every time you consume antibiotics, every time you use mouthwash, you're destroying your biology. You don't know that you're destroying until you develop the symptoms, but you're destroying your biology because you're killing your best friends.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Compound Wisdom. I'm your host, Steve Sood, and today I'm actually joined by Momo, co founder and chief science officer of Viome, one of my favorite companies. Now, Momo has spent the last 16 years chasing a massive question. Why do some people stay healthy in their 80s and 90s while so many others run into chronic diseases much earlier? His answer is that we have to stop guessing and start decoding what the body's actually doing down to the microbial and human gene expression. We'll get into Viome's origin story, why people called this science fiction, what a real health dashboard could look like, and how food could become preventative maintenance for the human body. Awesome, Momo. Welcome to Compound Wisdom. Thank you for being a guest, man.
Pleasure to be here.
You have literally one of my favorite companies, especially on what you guys are doing from the scientific side, which we'll touch on, and really from like a marketing side and changing and disrupting the space. But I want you to start off. Tell me about your journey because it is a fascinating one to say the least, and really what you went through to start the current, and obviously Biome, and how you got to this point as well.
Yeah, it's a long story, but let's start with some highlights. So, first of all, I want people to understand that we've had preventive maintenance for airplanes since the 1960s. And before that, flying was very risky. You were very likely to die. Whereas after preventive maintenance for the airliners was introduced, now it's become basically the safest mode of transportation. And the difference is that now you understand how the system works, you understand what you need to measure, and you understand all the failure modes, and you fix them before the plane takes off. And that's really what makes the plane so safe. It's not that they're less complex, they're actually far more complex than they used to be. So that's really what transformed the airline industry. We are now bringing that to the human body. Until now, if you get diagnosed with a cancer or a chronic disease, it's literally been bad luck. Like, it's bad luck. You had no idea that it was coming. And today, in fact, if you're diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, it's almost like a death sentence because you have greater than 90% chance of dying in the next few years. And that's still bad luck. But in fact, pancreatic cancer, like all other chronic diseases and cancers, are not bad luck. They're simply a system of biochemistry reactions that we don't yet understand. That's all it is. And if we can identify the cascade of those reactions that lead to a chronic disease and cancer early, and if we can find ways to prevent and reverse those imbalances, just like we can on an airliner, we will never have diseases and cancer. That's basically what we're going to discuss today. And that sounds like science fiction, but we're actually implementing it today. And we're going to talk about the disease risk scores that we've developed that we just published on. And we're going to talk about the results of randomized controlled trials that we're going to be publishing soon, and so on. All right. So now getting back to your question, how did all this start?
Yeah.
So,
You said
well,
a key word, science fiction. I want you to highlight that as you talk about it.
I mean, yeah, it's we're discussing things that are science. So in 2004, the computational and laboratory / experimental technologies were so primitive that if I pitched this idea to anyone in 2004, they would say that's not possible, right? But in 2010, it was starting to become possible. And so in 2010, I changed my scientific career. I have a PhD in chemistry, and I studied the human body way beyond what anyone would teach you in like medical school or in PhD or anywhere. I literally was interested in every part of the human body, how it functions. And the motivation for that was there are hundreds of thousands of people living today who are in their 80s and 90s that live a perfectly normal and healthy and fulfilling life, right? So these people are farming, sheep herding, cooking, cleaning, they dress themselves, they shower, they do everything, and they're happy. They have a social life they look forward to every day. That is the proof that nature has built humanity to live that long healthy. So in order to do that, we don't need drugs. We don't need special treatments. We don't need hyperbaric chambers, polypharmacy, special surgeries. Those people don't get any of that. They just live one with nature and they live a long, healthy life. So the solution has already been figured out, nature has figured it out. All we have to do as scientists is figure out how to make that so that everyone is empowered to live that kind of a lifestyle intentionally. And so in 2010, I started this journey, and it took 6 years to develop the underlying technology, which is what we use today at Viome. So I was at Los Alamos National Laboratory, spent 6 years with I led a very large team of something on the order of 35 scientists. And we discovered and created this foundational technology that is powering Viome today. We patented all that, and now Viome holds exclusive license to all of that core technology. And now over the last 10 years, we've been commercializing, scaling, optimizing, automating all that technology, but it's the same technology that we invented at Los Alamos National.
It's amazing, man. I want you to really touch on some of the, really the belief that you have, because I know science fiction. We had talked about, when you were going through that 6 year process, everyone thought you were not necessarily crazy, but they're like, "This is science fiction. No way anybody's gonna figure this out in our lifetime." Because that's huge.
Well, I mean, people did think I was crazy because, being a scientist at Los Alamos National Lab is kind of like a really cushy job. Like, you have a nice, sweet pension plan, you have a high salary, your job is really nice, like really nice. You live in a great place, and so why would anyone disturb that, right? So I disturbed that in a pretty significant way in 2010 by completely changing my scientific career. And then in 2016, by simply resigning. I didn't even go on like an entrepreneurial leave. I literally cut the cord and left that super cushy job, right, to start Viome because I had a very strong belief in what we're doing. And of course, now it's turning out to be true. But in 2010, every scientist that I talked to, if when I pitched them the platform, they just couldn't believe me because they said, "You're telling me that human shit plays a role in human health." Like, it makes no sense because we have an entire societal system in place to prevent us from contacting shit and to disposing and getting rid of it because it smells bad, it looks bad, and it's bad for you. Like, how can human shit have any association with human health, right? That's sort of a real problem for people to understand, even scientists, right? That's one part that was really sort of making me look crazy. And the second part was that what I wanted to do was profile the human body to such depths with such precision that at that time it wasn't really possible. And people thought the technology wouldn't be invented for another 50 to 100 years. And so why would I risk my entire career to do that? But we took only 6 years to develop the technology. So yeah, it was a lot of barriers and it was a lot of strong beliefs, but based again on all of my research and my experience as a PhD chemist, I knew that this was the right thing. And so, yeah, that just carried me through all the hardships.
That's amazing, man. Relentless belief. Now you go from doing 6 years of research to, creating Biome with a couple co-founders. Talk about that journey and, finding the co-founders and the relationship that you have as well.
I mean, that's a really, really super cool story, whether people think it's cool or not. I'll summarize it, and of course, people can ask more questions. But basically, yeah, in 2016, the technology was ready for commercialization. It was completely ready. I had studied entrepreneurship for 10 years. I knew that this was my next step, that I wanted to commercialize it and put it in people's hands. I didn't want to just publish papers and get more grants, right? It was ready. And so there were several options. I could have started a company and applied for SBIRs to get some money. I could have started a nonprofit institute or a foundation and tried to get money that way. And I could have also sought, financing from VCs. And just as luck would have it, and it was a great luck, Naveen Jain had started an investment firm 2 years earlier called Blue Dot. And his mission was, as part of Blue Dot, to identify research that was still research, but that had the greatest potential for transforming healthcare. And he spent 2 years going to every university, every national lab in the United States. He went to every institute and university in Japan and Germany, many other countries, South Korea. So he was on the road for 2 years, basically looking for that big technology that's going to profoundly disrupt healthcare as we know it, right? And after 2 years, he landed at Los Alamos National Lab, just like everywhere else. And he found me, and I made the pitch as a Shark Tank. We basically organized a Shark Tank. I made the pitch And Naveen, being so smart, he realized literally in 3 days that this was it. This was the disruptive healthcare changing technology.
Love it.
And so that's a huge credit to him that he as a business person very quickly realized that. Now, credit to me is that, you know, thousands of top scientists in the world had made a pitch to him, including many scientists at Los Alamos National Laboratory. And these guys are way smarter than me. They have way more technology than me, but they didn't focus their technology on something very applicable, very concrete, and they didn't pitch the technology the way I did. And so, you know, like I had a friend who gave a pitch, and his first slide, this guy's like super brain power. His first slide was a not labeled graph that shows activation energy of electron orbitals in some fluorescent molecules, right? Naveen is like, I'm sorry, where's the business here? Like, what are we selling? I mean, I'm not making a connection, right? Whereas my slides were, here's the problem we're solving, here's how we're going to solve it, here's what we've done so far, and here's the road to revenue in 6 months, right? And Naveen was like, whoa, I get it. Like, he was very engaged. And so we went out for lunch. He asked me more questions. We went for dinner. And he was like, okay, sounds good. 3 days later, he calls me and he's like, when are we starting the company?
I love that.
Yeah, so that
Yeah,
was a
there.
really nice thing. But you know, I had gone through 6 years of not only doing R&D, but also getting to the point where we can do everything we need to do to jump into a clinical setting and knew exactly what we needed to do. And even though I told Naveen we would have revenue in 6 months, we actually had revenue exactly 5 months from the day. So 5 months from the day we started the company, we had first kits sold. And so that's because I had spent so much time planning for all this. And that's really, I would say, a major takeaway is that 95% of biotech companies die within a few years. And one of the main reasons is that they continue to do research and development and they have no revenue, right? They have continuous promises that they will have a product on the market and they need more and more money. But eventually, even the most trusty VC is going to say, you know, at some point in time, this has to turn into a business. You know, we're not funding research. And to me, that's the single biggest problem with biotech startups is that they continue to do research. Whereas I had already done that research from government funding and we were ready to commercialize it and go for revenue. So 5 months it took to set up the lab, validate everything, develop the back end, the front end, and boom, we were
Yeah.
selling our kits.
Beautiful. Let's take a step back for the general audience. I'm sure, I don't know if you ever heard the term explain it like I'm five. When you're going through this pitch, I want you to explain what it is that you research, the product that you guys have with Viome and what it is that you guys do, obviously from the testing standpoint and what you're trying to do in the space as well.
Okay, yeah. So I'll explain it like you're five. So,
Yeah.
so I want to go back to my analogy with jet airliners, right? A jet airliner is a very complex machine, and human body is a very complex machine. When a jet is working perfectly, all of its parts are functioning, it flies well, no problems. If something breaks down, the plane may crash, right? And so for us, the analogy is we're fine in our 20s, all of our systems are working, we're healthy, we have no symptoms. But over decades, things start to break down. Parts of our physiology start to break down, and those are silent. We don't know that they're breaking down. We may even test and find out that our ApoB is high or that our fasting insulin is high, but there's not going to be any symptoms, right? And so at some point in time, there's going to be a day where you have symptoms, but the day before you didn't. The disease actually didn't occur overnight. The disease started years and more likely decades before. And so what we need to apply to the human body is a system of measurements that tells you decades before any symptoms onset what parts are breaking down that are eventually going to lead to a disease, and how do we fix them? That's very important because there's all these diagnostics that tell you you're screwed. And
Yeah.
you're like, well, I don't need to know when I have pancreatic cancer stage 4 because my life is going to be very short beyond that point. I want to know 15 years before I'm going to get pancreatic cancer that all the system is in place to create cancer And how do I reverse those imbalances that are going to eventually lead to pancreatic cancer so that if someone asks me, hey, will you develop pancreatic cancer? I can say, no, I will not. I know I will not, right? And that's basically the system we're building at Viome. So let's now turn to biology. So I want people to understand the human body not by what their eyes see. We're not like a heart is not what your eyes see. A liver is not what your eyes see. I want people to understand that the human body is 100,000 moving pieces. And we'll get to those pieces pretty quickly here. But 100,000 moving pieces, and 50,000 of those are controlled by our own genes. This is what we inherited from our parents. 50,000 of those moving pieces are actually running by our microbiome. So half of our health is human, half is microbial. So every time that you're eating foods that have preservatives, every time you consume antibiotics, every time you use mouthwash, you're destroying your biology. You don't know that you're destroying until you develop the symptoms, but you're destroying your biology because you're killing your best friends. And so you have to pay attention to your best friends just as much as your body because you're literally a symbiosis between those two. Okay, so now we have an understanding of 100,000 pieces, 50,000 human, 50,000 microbial. When they're working perfectly, we have a perfect health. When they start breaking down, we may be pre-symptomatic, but we're breaking down our health. And at some point in time, more and more things will break to the point where enough things break where we now have symptoms and we call it a disease. Okay, so what Viome does is we measure these moving pieces. And we measure them using a process called metatranscriptomics. That's a little bit hard to understand, but it's RNA sequencing. I think most people are familiar with DNA sequencing, like DNA has been a terminology that people have used, and there's a lab method called sequencing where you can actually sequence DNA. But we're doing RNA sequencing, and that's a bit more challenging topic to understand, but let's translate that into something that people understand, which is making beer. All right, so if you take brewer's yeast, that's called Saccharomyces cerevisiae technically, right? But it's called brewer's yeast. It's a yeast, it's a microorganism. And if you sequence the yeast in DNA world, you can say this is brewer's yeast. It can make beer. It can. You have zero information as to whether it is making beer or it's not. You have zero information whether that yeast died 3 years ago and its DNA is still there, or it's alive, but it's doing something else. You have zero information. All you know with DNA sequencing is that you identified that there is DNA from yeast. You know nothing more than that, okay? But what I want to know is the yeast making beer? Now, how's the yeast going to make beer? You have to provide it with a substrate or raw material, which is barley, malted barley, right? And then it'll make you beer. If you keep it warm and give it barley and water, it'll make you alcohol, right? And so that is a few of those 100,000 moving pieces that I described. That is a few moving pieces. It takes a few moving pieces by a live microorganism to convert barley into ethanol. Now, if we want to get a little bit even closer to, let's say, the gut microbiome, in gut microbiome, microbes are making something called short-chain fatty acids. One of the most famous ones is called butyrate. So think of butyrate as a molecule just like ethanol. And that butyrate is extremely important for our health. And we can discuss, if you think your audience will benefit from that, how it's important for our health. But it's the exact same process that butyrate is produced by microbes, and they need raw materials that you consume. They can't make it from thin air. You have to actually feed them. And so that process starts from birth. Human milk contains foods that the baby cannot digest. It literally chemically cannot utilize the calories. The food is made in breast milk to feed specific microbes to make butyrate. How cool is that? So
Right now, man, I have a 1-month-old.
This symbiosis between humans and microbes starts literally at birth. You acquire the microbiome from your mom, and that microbiome is protective, and it enables full childhood development, mental, physical, cognitive, and immunological. And butyrate is one of many, many molecules that the microbiome is producing for the baby to enable that growth, that healthy growth. And so now we discussed a few moving pieces, but remember, we have 100,000 of those. So we need to quantify those 100,000 moving pieces and we have to optimize each one of them. And that's what the Viome platform is doing. It's an extraordinary system that is powered by both experimental lab technology that didn't exist a few years ago and computational AI tools that also could not be performed just a few years ago.
That's amazing, man. Now I want you to touch on like your guys' business model. Are you guys direct to consumer? I mean, obviously, third party partners, or what's like the go to market strategy after, especially right now, I guess, more than
Yeah. Okay. Well, at the moment, so for the last 10 years, we've been direct to consumer. Now we have a whole team we are hiring to go to the healthcare, so to go to the providers. But I want to go much beyond that. I want to create for your audience the vision. When I designed this whole platform and idea in 2010 and sort of reset my scientific career, the ultimate goal, which is going to come in 5 to 15 years from now, is that every person on earth from birth to death is on Viome plan and it's free to them. And so that's key. They're on the Viome plan and it's free to them. And
touch on that a little bit?
yeah, whether that's going to come mostly from direct to consumer or whether it's going to be integrated via healthcare providers or both, it doesn't matter. And so what we need is we just discussed that the first acquisition of the microbiome is a super important event. It's probably the single most important event in your life is the microbiome you acquire at birth, and then how you nurture it during your lifetime, all the way up until healthy aging. It's now known that healthy aging is requiring a healthy microbiome. So you need to follow your microbiome and your physiology and digitize your body every 6 months for the entire life. And I think you wanted me to touch upon the free part because you're like, wait a minute, how's this going to be free?
Yeah.
When we have strong health economic data to prove that this is true preventive medicine, meaning that if you digitally profile human body from birth and you provide them with the nutrients that they need in order to live a healthy life, you won't need to run diagnostic tests for pancreatic cancers or multiple sclerosis. You won't need to run imaging for cardiovascular disease. You won't need cancer treatments. You won't need multiple sclerosis, biologics, all those treatments. When you prove mathematically that there's a giant ROI, whoever is paying for your healthcare, whether that's your healthcare provider or your employer or national healthcare system, they're going to want to pay you for Viome and put Viome in your hands and say, here, Steve, follow your Viome because for your lifetime, we're going to pay way less for Viome than we would for your healthcare.
Love that.
And so that's where the free part is going to come in.
Nice, man. I love it. I love the vision. Let's talk about like what is on your guys' roadmap for the next 3 to 5 years, if you can chat about it.
Yeah, we can chat about anything. We are here to transform the world and help the world. So we are pretty open about everything. So as I mentioned, we have been focusing on direct to consumer because the healthcare system is very resistant to nutrition. They're afraid of it. They don't trust it. They don't believe in it. There are many reasons they can't monetize, right? So
Exactly. You hit on the one thing they can't monetize.
that's a big deal, unfortunately. And so, yeah, so the healthcare system is very resistant to integrating nutrition. However, there's now more and more demand. There are people now who are patients who demand nutritional advice from their doctors. And you cannot just say, eat healthy, because that's too generic. There is no such thing, right? And so we've created a team and we've created now a system of products that are specifically there to integrate nutrition into any kind of healthcare scenario and empower the physician to provide state-of-the-art nutritional advice, not as a replacement for anything, but simply as a foundation to good health. And then from there, you can apply all other therapeutic strategies that you normally do. We want every single interaction between a healthcare provider and a patient, no matter what the circumstances are, to start with, you need to start with good nutrition for you. Personalized nutrition, because we're all about personalized nutrition, and then we'll work our way up to other treatments. And so, yeah, so in terms of the next 3 to 5 years, we're obviously going to continue our direct to consumer. That's our bread and butter. We have now very successfully integrated into concierge clinics. So 80% of concierge clinics that we have contacted have either already integrated into their offerings or we are in the process of like working out the agreement for them to integrate it. And when I say integrated, I mean, you as a patient of that clinic cannot choose to not have Viome. It is integrated into their
Yeah.
lowest end offering for everyone because they've recognized the power of this, right?
Yeah.
And so concierge clinics are eating this up because the science and the data are so compelling. We have a meeting with them, we presented, they're like, well, I mean, you guys have spent 16 years and $250 million figuring out how to integrate how to personalize nutrition. Like, why would we try to reinvent the wheel? Like that's an impossible task, right? So just utilize it's all ready to go. Now like I said, we're hiring a team right now that's going to actually go to mainstream healthcare and try to figure out a business model because even if a physician at a hospital says, I want this, if it doesn't make money to the hospital, the administration may not allow it. And so I think that's going to be the challenge. How do the healthcare providers monetize? So if you or anyone in your audience has any ideas, just let me know, right? How do we integrate nutrition into healthcare where the healthcare actually wants to do it?
Yeah. I have someone I can introduce you to. That'll give you, yeah, for sure. That's awesome. I want to really change topics and talk about my favorite two-letter word and really where the future is going from not only just healthcare, but in general. So I want to chat about AI. What are your thoughts on AI? What do you guys, obviously, you're doing a lot with AI. What are your future plans with AI? And then we can touch and end with where we think AI and healthcare is going in the next few years.
Well, there's two sides to AI. One is the hype that's currently surrounding AI, and the second
Hype.
is
I don't know if there's that much hype.
Ugh. There are many companies that basically say they're AI company. What they actually have is they have horrible or no data, and they have some AI engine, and they say they can do all these things. That's a completely false marketing claim, right? That's the hype part. The real part of AI is that it's enabled everything we've achieved has been enabled by AI. So we started doing AI because before it was hot, because before people knew about it, right? So
Yeah.
a little bit of history is one of our co-founders is Guru Banavar. He was the chief science officer for IBM Watson. And so he basically led something like 850 scientists and several thousand other staff to develop AI that was the most advanced in the world. You know, they did the Jeopardy, they did the chess, they did, all the IBM Watson challenges. And so he brought the most robust AI to Viome. And from day one, we implemented AI methods from day one. So for 10 years, we've been using AI as the standard approach to all of our data. And we didn't hype it up the first 5 or 6 years, right? Because it was just not hot, but we were using it because the amount of data we're generating is impossible to crunch using any other traditional method. It's simply vast amounts of data, right? When you're measuring tens of thousands of biomarkers and you're collecting all this other additional health data for a population of 500,000 people across the globe, yeah, I mean, the computational infrastructure we're using is like supercomputers of yesteryear every day. So yeah, so AI we've been using and it's made sense of our data, but I do want to mention something that's very foundational. Whenever says we're using AI, the first question you should ask is, what was the training set for your AI? That's the first question you should ask, because if they threw in some publicly available data that are heterogeneous and crap, or if they put in data that are not relevant for the problem they're trying to solve, either one of those two, it doesn't matter how much AI you're using, it's not going to find anything useful. So it can find solutions, but they're false discovery and they're not related to what you're trying to solve. And so those are two huge pitfalls of AI, that you have to have a very large, very homogeneous data set that is relevant to the problem you're trying to solve. So those three key terms: large, homogeneous, and relevant. If you don't have all three, your AI is useless. And so that's really what people need to think about.
That's yeah, I completely agree with that. Where do you see AI in the next 2 to 3 years with healthcare?
Woo! Wow, that is the single most exciting thing in my life right now, professional.
You and I both. Yeah.
Um, so I'll tell you right now that we generate phenomenal amounts of biological data from humans. And on average, we can interpret 40% of it. So we still don't know 60% of the human body what it's doing. 60%. And this is state of the art. We are using the state of the art molecular analysis, state of the art bioinformatic analysis, state of the art databases, genomic databases, and functional microbiome and gene databases. And still 60% of the human body is a dark matter, but we have the data. We just cannot interpret it. So to me, the single biggest opportunity we have is to learn the remaining parts of human biology, how they function, how they're interconnected, and how they're controlled by micronutrients, so that we can complete this sort of dashboard where we can have a gauge for every disease and every cancer on everyone's app and tell them, here's your actual today's risk for that disease and cancer. And if it's high, here's exactly what you need to do to lower it. And you go and do that, and it lowers your gauge. That's exactly what we need. And I think, not that I think, we have been using traditional machine learning for the last 10 years, and it's now become transparently obvious that it's not sufficient to solve the human biology problem. Generative AI is going to be a requirement. And so the next big move for Viome is to develop a foundation model of human biology using either just Viome data or Viome data plus additional layers of data to overlay a foundation model and then really understand, because basically our entire physiology is controlled to the largest extent by nutrition and lifestyle, and to a
Mhm.
small degree by our genetics.
That's amazing, man. Definitely synergies there. Now, I want you to give the audience one piece of advice for somebody that's really, looking to get into preventative healthcare and, plan 15 years ahead.
Well, I would say the first piece of advice is, what problem are you trying to solve? Is first. So create the vision of, what does 15 years from now look like? What problem are you solving and how? Don't worry about what tools you have available, what tools are available today, what you can license. Like, don't limit yourself to that. Just think about, what is it that you want to solve? And then ask yourself, okay, what is the best way to get there? And then figure out a way to get there. Because in 2010, when I figured out what I want to solve and I looked around, there was no technology to solve that problem. So one way for me would have been to say, well, the technology is not there. I'm going to wait until I die, and then maybe
Yeah.
the technology is going to be ready, right?
Yeah.
What most other companies in the microbiome space, for example, do is that they say, okay, microbiome field is hot right now. Let's outsource a microbiome test to a university lab and find the cheapest one. Let's hire an engineer in India to build us a front end. Let's call it AI, and we have a business. And that's a cheap entry to a hot field. Let's try to hype it up and monetize and sell it. That's the
Yeah.
motivation behind the vast majority of businesses, right? I started by saying, what problem do I want to solve? Then how do I want to solve it? Then I spent 6 years of 7 days a week working for 6 years to develop the technology needed to do it. And then another 10 years at Viome with Guru and Naveen to actually solve it. And that's what it takes to solve a big problem. If your goal is to solve a big problem, if you want to make money quick, that's probably not the best approach. There are many other ways to make money more quickly. But that's not what your question was. Your question was, how do you actually solve a big problem in precision medicine or preventive medicine?
Yeah. Amazing, man. Well, thank you for everything you've done, your passion. I mean, I'm sure the audience can hear it. And yeah, thank you for doing this, man. This was amazing.
I enjoy every day. So, like, I basically, in 2010, I basically retired because even though I work 7 days a week, even on my vacation,
Yeah.
this is so fun and so exciting, and that I would not be doing anything else.
Yeah. I can tell, man. That's awesome. I wish I hope everyone gets to experience that in their life. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you, Momo. This was great.